Hey there, horror movie tea sippers.
The following podcast episode will contain spoilers for the movie we are about to review. If you have not seen the movie and do not wish to have anything ruined prematurely, please do not continue to watch or listen until you have seen the movie.
And welcome to the Horror Movie Tea Podcast. For our very last Asian Horror Month movie, we are doing a Japanese horror movie, but an anime horror movie.
We couldn't resist.
I had talked to Jess about it, and she's like, it's a full-on movie? I'm like, yes, there's not very many, but it's a full-on movie.
Usually it's a series, and especially in the horror genre for anime, it's typically a series or an OVA. So to find a movie, like a feature-length movie, it's rare, to say the least.
Yeah.
And it also sounded the most suspenseful or interesting or scary of the options that you provided. So
yeah,
I was like, let's do it.
And this is an older movie. I saw that there were a few similar renditions to it, but it's based off of a novel, but this movie was released in 1997. And before we go into tea and the summary, we do want to provide a trigger warning. Please keep in mind that we will be mentioning stalkers as well as scenes where there's rape.
Yeah, they don't shy away from that either.
Yeah, it's a movie that's not afraid to give you discomfort.
Yeah.
But before we go off into that, tea. So I copied you.
We're both drinking Blue Lady from Zest Tea.
We thought it was perfect because perfect blue. Ha ha ha.
Yes. So. Also caffeine. It is early.
Yes. Even though we had kind of a late start.
Shush you.
Perfect blue. I'm very glad that this summary is going to be a lot more concise than the last movie. So Perfect Blue is about a pop idol named Mima who is wanting to change her career to become an actress. And so the beginning of the film just starts off with her, announcing that she's going to become an actress. And then the movie is following her as an actress. But this weird stuff starts happening. She obviously has at least one stalker. And there's a point in the movie where she's filming a rape scene. And the writer that made that scene ends up getting killed. And then there's like a photographer that ends up taking like nude photos of her. He ends up getting killed. So each person that's quote unquote like tainting her reputation is getting killed. It messes with your head, but then there's also like actual murder that's in the movie to like add on top of it. So for entertainment, oh man, this is a movie that I saw when I was a teenager and I was like deep into anime and I like lived and breathed anime.
Yes.
But a friend had shown this movie to me, and even being an anime fan at the time, it still like really changed my perception of how animation can show such a mature topic and still be chilling despite it being animation. It's interesting because it has a realistic style, but it's stylized enough. Like the stalker guy, they make him look really unsettling.
Stalker murder face.
Yes. And it just, it's a very beautiful movie in a weird way. But anyway, so this isn't the first time I've watched the movie. I watched it multiple times. It is one of my... If I feel like watching an anime, but I want it to be like creepy, or I want to watch just in general, not even anime included, if I want to watch like a psychological movie, this is definitely one of my top picks. So I'm giving this an 8. I think the animation style definitely complements the story. The style and the shots of the scenes is very deliberate, and I think it very much helps the movie in a lot of ways. It makes it artistic, but also ramps up the psyche of what the character is going through. With the main character, Mima, needing to be helped with how to work a computer. It does kind of date the movie a little bit.
It has a floppy disk drive.
Yeah, and they still use landlines. Some people still use landlines.
The internet was just becoming a thing. She had to be shown how to use the internet.
Yeah, we're like, oh my god, you feel old. Because we remember when...
Oh, yes. We remember. It's been a minute.
Yeah, but another thing that makes this film so great, though, is I love the parallels between what she's filming and what's actually happening in her life. Like, it kind of messes with your brain a little bit more, but at the same time, it also, once you've seen the whole movie and you know the twist, it kind of helps put the pieces together a little bit better. Freaking brilliant. And I do like how the movie kind of tricks you. Because at first you think it's the stalker guy. And yes, while it technically was him, there's a point where they almost trick you that maybe it's Mima. But then they find out, oh no, it was her manager. But so it's like her manager was emailing the stalker guy, and they were both...
She was manipulating him.
Yeah. Awesome twist. Is so I loved watching Jess because you're like, oh, like it's the stalker guy. He's obviously the murderer. And I really want to be like, not quite.
I knew it was definitely a big part of it, but I was wondering where the emails were coming from.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But another thing that I like about the movie is the fact that it doesn't shy away from making you feel uncomfortable. That includes the murders. Like, you get to watch some of the people die, and I still cringe, even though I've watched the movie several times. Specifically, the rape scene that she films.
That one was hard.
Because part of the parallels there, she films a rape scene, but then later on, the stalker actually attempts to rape her. But yeah, whenever she's filming it, that they make it really realistic. It's really uncomfortable. The only way I can get through that scene is because the director says cut several times through the scene. And so it kind of brings you back to reality on, oh, she's filming this. But
the actor that's in the scene, the one that's portraying the rapist actually apologizes to her. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. But it's a great film on like self-reflection. Mm-hmm. It's great mystery film, suspense. But yeah, overall, if you guys haven't heard of this movie or you have and you just haven't watched it, definitely watch this movie. Like, it's great. But anyways, I know I've been on my soapbox long enough.
A little bit. You went on a tirade there.
I did.
All right, so this was my first time watching this. So I don't have the nostalgia glasses on or anything like that. I was able to look at it with fresh eyes. And I actually really enjoyed this movie. There was a lot of different stylistic choices that I think really brought it together. It was a little jumbled, but that helps show just how fractured her mind was and trying to reorient herself. She left her comfort zone of Pop Idol to try to do something new, something she was unfamiliar with and uncomfortable with, but something that she felt was a good move for her in the long run, and that was to be an actress. So playing these different roles, she almost went a bit too method in her method acting. And she just started wondering who she was. She kept asking a lot throughout the movie, "Who are you?" And it seemed more to herself than anyone else around her. So it was a very good choice. It was very interesting. I do like a lot of the parallels there. They really bring it together, especially at the end scene for I think it was a TV series that they were filming. And that last scene really brought it home, and it really tied it together, and that was really nice. I do think that her learning how to use the internet just makes me feel so old. But her seeing that, like, chat room and everything, the blog, was very interesting, and it makes sense that it's her manager because even with a stalker, he can't get close enough to her for some of the photos or the sound files that were on there. Yeah. So it really makes you think if you're really looking at it pretty hard, you can pick up the clues to figure out who it actually is. But they did a really nice job of bait and switch a few different times. Mm-hmm. So that was really cool. Especially you start to really figure it out. If you hadn't gotten it by that point, it really drives it home who it actually is when the manager says in the car after she was almost raped by the guy, Stalker Murderface. That's perpetually what I'm going to call him. Mima asked, "Where are we going?" And Rumi said, Crazy Pants said, "I'm taking you to Mima's room," which was what the blog was called. She didn't pick up on that. She thought she was going home, but the manager took her to her home instead.
Yeah, and you find out that she replicated Mima's room, like exactly. Like it had her old like pop idol pictures and
her stuffed animals, the aquarium with the neon tetras. I did not appreciate when it got broken. Those fish did not deserve that. Just saying. Also, when a lot of her neon tetra died, I have very high suspicions that it was Rumi that did something to the tank that killed her fish, which is extremely unfortunate and rude. Rude. The aquarium system is a very delicate balance, and it can take a while to get it to that level. And, like, we were still, after the move, it took about a month or so for everything to be completely leveled. For Rumi to most likely have messed with that tank in order to kill her fish, I take offense to that, personally. It's just rude. Also, living creatures. I wasn't as upset about, like, the screenwriter or the photographer, pervy photographer, or Stalker Murderface, but the fish. The fish! That's messed up. But I do give it a 7.5. It was a very good movie. Very interesting choices. They do keep you on your toes and guessing and figuring out if it's her, like actually Mima, that's just having a psychotic break, or if it's Stalker Murderface, or if it's someone else. So, kudos to them for that.
Yeah.
And they really don't shy away from that rape scene that they were filming. That was uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah.
That was harder to watch than the murders. I can do gore. We do gore all the time. This is nothing new. But the filming of the rape scene, I'm glad they had the cut scenes in there.
Yeah.
That was messed up.
Yep. Very rough.
Yes.
Wrapping up, I do find it interesting how your interpretation of like Mima asking like, "Who are you?" Like, to me, I was picturing it as like her trying to figure out whether she made the right decision, whether or not she wants to go back to being a pop idol, and kind of redefining herself. Mm-hmm. It is one of those movies that's deep enough that you can get multiple meanings from it. For anyone who's a horror fan and is also an anime fan, you probably know that it is difficult to find an anime that's actually scary.
Yes.
And this one...
There's a handful. Maybe.
Yeah, you can probably count on your hand, like, how many there are that are actually good.
And usually they're only scary the first time.
Yeah.
After multiple watchings. It's still interesting and it's still really enjoyable, but doesn't quite have that same feel.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of that can be said about regular live action movies too, that once you see it once, it's not as scary, but there are some.
Yeah. But it's like with Perfect Blue, since you're kind of, at least for me personally, I kind of get lost in Mima's head with her. And so for me, it's not the same as the first experience, of course, but to me, I can still get sucked in and like world around her, the twists and turns and stuff.
Well, and it's such an artistic movie that I feel like if I watched it again, there would be other things that I didn't notice before. So it was a really enjoyable movie, guys.
Yeah.
But with that said, let's go ahead to the realism.
Yes. For realism, I'm going to give it a 6. And I have to say, I'm already impressed because this movie was more realistic than a lot of live action movies we've watched. As far as like the gore, the realism of the situation. The reason why I only gave it a 6 is I can see the situation definitely happening, but of course the likelihood is pretty slim. They didn't go over the top like some live action movies do. Like they kept it pretty realistic.
It was sensible gore.
Yes. It was purposeful gore. It wasn't gore for the sake of gore.
Like, there's a time and place for that kind of thing, gore for the sake of gore. This was not one of them, and they didn't venture into that realm, thankfully.
Yeah. And one thing I noticed is Rumi, whenever or Rumi or the stalker guy, whenever they kill, they take out the person's eyes. And I wonder if it's because they saw Rumi, like, naked or in a compromising position or...
Rumi?
Or sorry, Mima. Mima, my bad. Mima.
So there's a few different interpretations to the removal of eyes, actually. It could say a few different things. It could say that they've seen something that they shouldn't have, like the killer's identity. They don't want them to have seen them. Or they saw Mima in a compromising position in a way that they weren't supposed to. Or it could be that you don't see the real me. Which I think that's a huge part of it, because when Stalker Murderface gets killed to death, he only had one of his eyes taken out. His other eye was still there. Yeah. So Rumi probably felt like he saw the real her. Well, her delusional self, anyway. But he didn't get it right. Maybe. Not completely. So she only took out one of his eyes instead of both.
Yeah, I was like, I can definitely see that. I can also see the eyes being removed because it's almost like taking Mima's quote-unquote like reputation back. It's like trying to unsee what happened.
Or you took a piece of her that you shouldn't have, so I'm going to take a piece of you.
Yeah. So very interesting. The one little nitpick that I have, and you can let me know what you think about it, is it was a TV show, and it was also 1997, so there wasn't the HBO type of shows that we see nowadays, where it can show fairly explicit material. So I'm extremely surprised that a rape scene would be allowed on television, even if it was a specialized thing. Like, I can see it being imitated to where it's not showing a lot, but
or
they were showing...
start to film it and then cut that scene to a different scene.
Yeah, but they were showing...
Oh, they showed a lot.
Yeah, they were showing a lot.
They showed a lot of that scene.
So to me, that was the only thing that I was like, that doesn't quite seem in the realm of
possibility.
Yeah, at the time. Nowadays...
Oh, nowadays, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I could see it a lot more.
Game of Thrones, we're looking at you.
Yeah. Thanks, Game of Thrones. Back in my day. I feel old.
But it is also Japan, so things could be different there. We have no context.
America is already pretty taboo about certain subjects, but Japan is even, like, more taboo. But to be honest, I don't know. From, like, what I know of Japan, I don't think that would be a thing, but I honestly can't say definitively whether or not that would be the case. I don't know.
Yeah, I could say for the time frame, I feel like it'd probably be a little less accepted. Most likely. But again, not sure.
Yep.
But what would... Not a native, don't know.
Yep. So what would you rate it?
A little bit of background, guys. If this is the first one that you've watched and you haven't really been keeping track, I am typically much more harsh on the realism scale than Alyssa is. Like, this is my...
You're gonna do it higher?
This is my thing. And so it's very difficult. But yes, I actually did rate it higher by 0.5.
That's 6.5.
I was really floundering between 6 and 7 because it is shockingly like, okay, in most of the movies that we've reviewed, we don't give it more than a 5, typically. It is rare when it gets a 5,
Yeah.
let alone higher. Most horror movies they just have way too much against them for realism for us to give it a decent score. But this one actually was really realistic. There were only a few things, and I feel like some of them are kind of nitpicky, but there were really only a few things that I could really truly be like, excuse you,
Yeah.
on, which I'm usually doing throughout the whole movie.
Well, and then just as before you move on, just as a little comment, because I've heard from some people, it's like, well, why are you doing a realism scale for a horror movie? We know it's going to be unrealistic, but we're trying to demonstrate that
There's a difference.
An unrealistic movie doesn't necessarily mean a good movie,
Yeah.
and a realistic movie doesn't always mean a bad movie.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes it's flip-flop. Sometimes the more realistic it is, because they're like so focused, it's like you have to have a nice balance of like
Yes.
entertainment, so like cinematography, character development, all of that, but then also have a certain level of realism, because if you go too far out into the abyss, then that can potentially take your audience out of the movie, because it's like you want to have that perfect balance where it's like you're sucked into the movie, you're focused, you're living with those characters through that
Yes.
scene, and that's what makes the horror movie scary.
The realism can impact the entertainment scale. I'm definitely an example of this. If a movie is too unrealistic, I can't really find myself enjoying it. Usually. There's a couple exceptions, but usually those exceptions are when I'm looking for something completely outside the realm of possibility. I just want to escape reality for a little while.
Yeah, the movie has to have a certain tone,
It
I think,
does.
to get away with that. Yeah.
It does. And you have to go into it knowing that this is definitely not a thing that could happen.
Yeah, it's almost like example, like the Conjuring movies. They're making the film with the intention that's based in reality. So it's like that type of movie you'd want to be more realistic than like, oh, Phantasm. Like that's just like a crazy
God.
movie, but it's supposed to be a crazy movie, so it's
Yeah.
okay if it's unrealistic.
I guess.
Yeah, we I guess let's forget about Phantasm and move on.
Please. The acid drip that is fantastic.
Yep.
Yeah, no. But it does make sense for certain movies like The Conjuring to be more realistic. So it helps. For me, personally, it helps the entertainment scale, the entertainment value. I tend to want to rewatch it more if I believe that it could happen. Again, we have to set aside assumptions for certain things, like if it's a creature feature, we have to say in our mind, okay, if this did exist, then how realistic would it be?
Yeah, it's mainly in those movies like the kills and stuff like
Yes.
that. Like if
Or
they
how they
like
react, or
yeah.
different scenarios like that. So, and I feel like they did a really, really good job with that.
Yeah.
The voice acting was spot on.
Yeah, in a lot of ways you kind of forget it's a
Yes.
animated movie.
A little bit, especially in the really uncomfortable scenes like murder, or the film where they're filming the rape, rather. And it's really, really uncomfortable to the point that you start wondering, is this actually happening? And she's just kind of taking a mental break in her mind where she's pretending to be an actress filming a scene, or is this actually happening?
Yeah, and then like when she's having like the mental breakdown afterwards, like I kind of want to know the history of the voice actors, because especially like Mima's voice actor It just, she and the character were like this. Like,
Yes.
they were so
She does an
tight-knit.
amazing job
Yeah.
making you believe that she is really upset with this whole situation.
And plus, I do feel like the reaction, since it was a more realistic anime movie, I feel like the reactions were pretty spot on.
Oh, yeah.
Like her mental breakdown. Yes.
Oh,
like,
that was so raw.
yeah. Yeah. It does. The reactions do seem genuine and raw despite
Yes.
it being animated, which is what part of the reason why not only does that make the realism scale for this movie like amazing, because it already has something not going for it because it's an animated movie, which makes it a little bit harder, but the fact that the reactions seem raw when someone had to actually animate scene by scene, freaking incredible.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. So, amazing job there. But there are a few things that I can't quite get
I'm ready.
past.
I'm so ready.
I can't
I'm
quite
excited.
get past. Now, again, this might be partly a cultural thing because things are different here than they are over there. I don't know exactly how it works there, but if a letter were to explode in someone's
should've known.
hand and face and an ambulance was called, it would be reported regardless to the police.
See, like, me and Jess were speculating about this last night because she was like, it should have been reported. But to me, I'm like, well, if they just said, oh, we had an accident, there's like an accidental explosion, or I accidentally hurt myself. Like, they could have, because
Okay, but the EMTs can't treat it as effectively if they don't know what the hell happened.
well, that might be a risk that they could have been willing to take. Because for those who need a refresher or haven't seen the movie, Rumi mentions after the letter explodes that he didn't want them to report that incident to the police, and so Jess was like, well,
There was blood.
he had an ambulance called.
There
so
was
it's like there should have
blood
been.
everywhere.
Yeah, there
He
was.
was bleeding profusely and on the ground.
Yep. Yeah.
PD would have been notified. If nothing else, to report the incident and to see if they could get anything off the remnants of the letter. That's a
Well-
crime.
Well, and then plus, like, they seem to just be like, "Oh, it was a prank." I'm like, "That's not a freaking
There was blood.
prank."
There was blood everywhere. That is not a prank.
They were probably trying to not concern her too much, but if anything, if they had contacted the police, they could have had someone like following her to help
Yes.
protect her.
Even if it was for a day or two.
Yeah.
But there was blood. He had his hands bandaged for like the rest of the movie that he was in. His hands were bandaged,
Though I do have
which
a
was fairly
question.
accurate, but still.
So, do you think the letter was sent by Rumi or was sent by the stalker guy?
That's a valid question.
And because
Could
it's
have been
like,
either.
at what point?
I feel like it was probably Rumi. They made it a point to keep it away from her. Like she was on set. So
like she was
could have
low key,
intervened.
like pretending
Yeah.
to be like innocent, but
Yeah.
because
And
I
it
also
made an impact because she saw it happen. And that I feel like would have had more of an impact than if it happened to her.
and then another thing that I wondered this even prior to the time that we watched it together, but at what point did Rumi and Stalker Guy like actually connect? Because it sounds like, way in the beginning of the movie, there was that internet
definitely-
page.
Yeah, there was way before then.
Yeah, so I wonder, but it was after it was after the rape scene though that people started actually dying. So it's like Rumi was starting to go down the rabbit hole. She was getting kind of crazy. She was hurting the manager guy with the letter, but then the rape scene, you see her like Rumi getting really upset, and I guess that was maybe either Mima accepting to do that scene or during the scene that was the final straw, and then that's when she decided to also start killing.
Yeah,
Maybe.
so my theory is it was before she even started acting.
Oh.
The dude was working at her last performance and was on set everywhere she went. Since Rumi is her manager, she could have had a say as to whether or not he got the part-time gig on each one.
Oh.
So I think she was in contact with him well before.
Oh, that's creepy thinking about.
Well, if she's that obsessed, as soon as she hears that Mima is thinking of going away from her image that she has set in her mind and wants to be an actress instead.
Like, that's kind of what breaks her. And
she already knows, as the manager, who her biggest fans are and who the creepy ones are to keep away from her generally.
Yeah.
But instead, she picked the creepiest stalker murder face that she could find and got in contact with him. And because his obsession aligned with hers, she manipulated him, but also put him in a position, used him as a pawn, basically, and put him strategically at each one. So he got something out of it. He was able to stay close to her and watch her and listen to her and maybe even get random memorabilia and things like a lot of stalkers do.
And that would make sense why he was like holding her in his hand, because at that point in time, it's like Rumi might have been feeding him. It's like, oh, I adore you.
Leading him on.
I'm glad that you're my biggest fan. And so maybe he thought that really was Mima.
He did.
Yeah.
He thought it was really her. She only contacted him through emails.
Yeah. Whew. Man, that brings a whole new perspective. It's like, it was bound to happen, but it's just because with the letter exploding, that already shows right there that Rumi and the stalker are capable of harming people.
Yes.
And so I think just
And the fax. Rumi would have the fax number.
And it said traitor.
And it said traitor, because she's going against the image that she had for her.
Yeah.
But she would definitely have that number. It's not likely that Stalker Murderface would have, unless Rumi gave it to him. Which is kind of a possibility, but I seriously doubt it at that point in the movie. Yeah. If it was later in the movie, I could definitely get that. But it most likely would have said imposter instead of traitor.
Yeah. Well, and then one thing that's interesting, too, if you think about, is, with anime, you have to leave a lot to just the assumption that, oh, it's an anime, for like having plot holes. Looking at you, Code Geass. But for this movie, because it's so focused on realism, and maybe because it's based off of a book, there's not really any plot holes. It's like you kind of wonder where all of the background pieces fit together, but it's not like, oh, it couldn't happen, this way. It's like it kind of gives you just enough subtle detail that you have to wonder.
There's one instance that I do say it would not have happened that way.
Okay. What?
And we talked about this last night.
Oh man, I slept
so when Stalker Murderface tries to rape Mima.
Oh, yeah.
When she grabs the hammer and hits him in the temple with the hammer, he freezes for a moment, and then he stands up and staggers over a ways and then falls down. Super extra. First off. Second off, not realistic at all, unless she hits like a freaking 5-year-old. Just barely taps him and he's just super dramatic.
Like he had a really bad concussion or something?
Yeah.
Oh.
Because if you hit someone with a hammer in the temple, unless you have 0 arm strength and just tap them, then at worst, they're going to die instantly. And they're going to fall on top of you because they're dead. And that's how gravity works. Or they're going to get a pretty bad concussion and fall unconscious, most likely. Or go blind, or both. All of the above. But again, would still fall on top of you. Her ankles awkwardly enough, were belted together, and he was between her legs.
Yeah.
So, as convenient and considerate as it was that he ended up standing up and staggering a few feet over before finally passing out, not accurate at all. Convenient, considerate, but not accurate at all.
Yeah.
He was the least rude one.
Yep. The stalker being considerate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot else to add. What about you?
That was mostly it. I understand the style choice of why at the end when she knew it was Rumi, why they kept showing it as her pop image self. That's kind of how she was seeing the whole scenario playing out in her head anyway, was she was battling against her past self and trying to break away from that image and do something different and be a different self, basically.
Yeah.
And it just kept trying to get her back, and it wasn't happening. So it was an interesting choice. I do feel, though, that it would have been creepier if it was more accurate and more realistic and actually showing Rumi chasing after her with the umbrella.
I see where you're coming from. I'm kind of going to meet you in the middle, because I do like the fact that they showed Mima, because it was very much like, because Mima starts seeing images of herself as she's going down this crisis, but then she ends up seeing Rumi as her former self. And then it just gives you this one little glimpse of Rumi chasing after her, which makes it look pretty creepy. And
it was creepy. It was super creepy.
I think they could have showed Rumi maybe once or twice during that chase, and it would have been fine, like little cuts just to go back and forth. But I think it wouldn't have been as meaningful if all you saw was Rumi chasing after her.
I just didn't really appreciate the floatiness.
It does kind of take you out of
they animated that chase scene.
I don't know, because it's like, on the one hand, I'm like, well, that is creepy because Mima is like running for her life, but but her old self is like so easily catching up. But then at the same time, it's like, well, it's almost like a fantasy, like la da 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 da.
I mean, I get like it was almost kind of the ghost of her past, and that's why she was kind of gliding along and all. But I mean, it's unsettling enough to know what's actually happening. Yeah, they could have just stuck with that. But I do get where they were trying to go with it and where they're coming from, and it was a choice. It was a choice.
Yeah, so, I think maybe they could have done Rumi a little bit more often to up the creep factor, but I do agree with them showing the way that they showed it, too, though.
And the last thing that I'll say is that they were on a busy street with a lot of cars going by. A lot of cars going by, and they're running in front of certain shops and things too. Like, not one single person saw what was happening. Like, there was clearly blood on their clothing. Not one person saw and yelled or started trying to call the police or anything. And the truck that almost hit her didn't really start slowing down until right when they were there.
Yeah. Very true. It'll be okay.
Calling bull on that. But for the most part, again, the rest of the movie was very realistic and very interesting. So they did a good job with it. Yep. And again, I was going back and forth between a 6 or 7. That is hard to do. It's hard for a movie to get me to do that. So good job. Very good job.
Yep.
Love this movie.
If you haven't seen this movie, go watch it. It's Perfect Blue, released in 1997. I know the copyright in the US was like 1999. I don't know if that will make a difference whenever you go search for it.
As it is an anime, they do have a version where you can watch it with English dub. I haven't seen the English dub. We watched it in Japanese with subtitles. I like to try to watch them first that way, if at all possible. But Alyssa has seen it in the English dub.
Yeah, and like,
how does it compare?
Whenever I initially watched it in the English dub, I didn't think it was that bad, but now actually watching it in the Japanese, I would suggest watching it in the Japanese. Because especially like the Rumi parts, the voice actress that does Rumi comes off more stupid, while in the Japanese version, it comes off as like creepy.
Mm-hmm. And animes are interesting like that. There's only a handful of ones that I'll prefer the English dub over the Japanese with subtitles. But again, some things are lost in translation, and other times it's just the voice acting. So it really just depends. This one, definitely watch the Japanese.
Yep. But as always, please like and subscribe.
And share our content, please. We love seeing your comments and everything as well. So if you have any suggestions or recommendations for us to watch the next movies and review them, please let us know. Send us a message or leave a comment down below. And as always, guys, stay safe and stay spoopy. Bye.